How do you assess China's current stance toward the Russia-Ukraine conflict, including any signaling about security guarantees, arms supply, or economic support? And what factors could push Beijing toward changing its posture in terms of Russia-Ukraine war?
This is a great question. And of course, as we all know, China at the international level claims or pretends that it wants to be a mediator, that it wants peace, a peaceful resolution. But effectively, China supports Russia in all possible ways, covertly, of course, through providing financial assistance, technological transfers, especially microelectronics, chips, etc., manufacturing of various electronic and technical assets, and of course political support. So I would say toward the beginning of the conflict, maybe China would have preferred for Russia to win quickly, because China would have been interested in pressing upon Taiwan, pushing on Taiwan, maybe even invading it. Now, I think at this point, China understands that the West is distracted in Ukraine, trying to help Ukraine against Russia's aggression. And so it seems to me that for China now, the best solution is to continue, for the war to continue in this format, whereby Russia doesn't become too powerful, of course, but at the same time, the West is using its funds, money, military equipment, etc. And of course, the attention of Western Europe is directed toward Ukraine primarily. Of course, now the U.S. with its with Trump's new national security strategy has placed the focus back onto China and Taiwan. So I would say for China it would be even more important to keep the war going, and so both the U.S. and Western Europe are distracted there in Ukraine.
Okay, I got it. In what ways do you expect China to balance its strategic priorities, Taiwan, its economy, and its relationship with United States when considering its position on negotiations and potential peace frameworks in Ukraine?
Of course, China is not capable of conquering Taiwan at this point, at this very moment, but they are they're preparing their naval assets, boosting the production of the building of additional navy vessels, ships, and also assets, technology that would allow China at some point in the future to actually surround, encircle, and attack Taiwan if necessary. We don't know yet, of course, if this is for the purpose of intimidation, so Taiwan kind of yields and surrenders, just like Russia wanted to do with Ukraine, or whether it's an actual plan for preparation for real attack on Taiwan. But at any rate, Taiwan must be ready, and the U.S. obviously, even under Trump, understands that. And recently, there was this announcement of a massive military equipment and ammunition transfer to Taiwan, several $billion, as you know, HIMARS rockets and systems, and air defense, and many other military equipment and assets. Of course, China is not very happy. And so at this point, they have to balance their future plans to potentially conquer the island with their growing capabilities, especially in the naval area. And of course, they have to make sure the U.S. Stays away from the conflict, which I don't think they will succeed in doing that. But definitely, in relation to my first answer, let's put it this way: for China, it would be ideal for both the U.S. and Europe to be distracted in Ukraine with Russia while it prepares a potential takeover of Taiwan.
For Global South partners, what incentives or norms are most likely to shape their position on the conflict, including energy security, development aid, or sovereignty debates, and how might their stance influence Western diplomatic options?
Well, the global south, of course, we use two words to describe it, but it actually consists of dozens of countries stretched across three continents. That's Latin America, Africa, and Asia, of course, South, Central and South and Southeast Asia. So these are extremely diverse countries, and each of them has its own interests, its own problems, structural, economic, political, etc. So it's difficult to say, it's difficult to find one single formula for all of them.
Mhm.
And of course, these are countries that have different things to offer on the world market. Obviously, the Arab nations of the Gulf states, they of course have oil, which is vital importance for the global economy. Other countries buy oil. India, of course, as you know, is a major buyer of Russian oil, and so. For example, for India, energy security is number one. So that's why they are quite friendly to Russia, at least diplomatically, openly. I mean, as you know, Modi and Putin met recently, and even though the U.S. imposed sanctions on India, these sanctions are pushing them toward Russia. Actually, other countries in Africa, Russia is very active across Africa. Unfortunately, propping dictators across the continent, using their Wagner and other mercenary companies, of course, to secure contracts and access to precious metals, gold, diamonds, oil, etc., and to also have political influence. So, to influence this entire diverse group of countries, the West must have a very complex, elaborate strategy that differentiates between those various countries and it tries to give them something that Russia does not. Obviously, economic aid, etc. Of course, then the competition is with China, especially in Africa, because the Chinese are investing massively in Africa, building infrastructure projects. So the West must compete very vigorously, even aggressively, with both Russia and China for the global South.
From Moscow's perspective, how sustainable is its engagement with Global South borrowers and suppliers under current sanctions? And what thresholds would indicate a tipping point in its willingness to sustain the war or seek a negotiated exit?
Well, the Russia's dealings with the global South are what's keeping Russia afloat, the Russian economy afloat in many ways. Especially as I mentioned, the contracts for oil with India, but also with, of course, oil and gas with China, and as I said, it's dealings, commercial and political involvement in Africa. So all of these resources, these sources of income for Russia that support its wartime economy. And so I don't think Russia will give up on these anytime soon. They have been cultivating these connections for decades. Many of those connections are personal. They go back to the Soviet times, almost, what is it, 70, 60, 70 years now, after the 50s, after the decolonization of this entire region. So Russia will not give up, will not stop working with the global South, with those three continents. And therefore, both Ukraine's diplomacy must be very active there and in trying to convince the leaderships of those countries that Russia is not the winning actor. Again, from Russia's point of view, from Moscow's viewpoint, their involvement and connections in the global South are vital, and it will be difficult. It will be a difficult struggle. There is no easy solution there because all these countries are very well connected to Russia. And so both the West and Ukraine have to spend a lot of efforts to sever that link to try to break this unholy, it's not an alliance, but it's really a network of that leads to Moscow through oil and gold and gas and all sorts of resources and assets.
Considering Russia's internal resource constraints, to what extent is the war increasingly constrained by manpower, military industrial capacity, and macroeconomic pressures? And how might these constraints shape strategic decisions in the near term?
Well, let's start from the last item, macroeconomic pressures. Of course, the Russian economy is not doing well. You heard Putin today. Even he admitted that the growth, last year's growth was only 1%, but he started using different techniques, different statistics, trying to convince the Russian people that the economy is actually doing better. That supposedly Russia is number 4 globally in purchasing power. I don't think that's true. But at any rate, yes, the Russian economy is facing severe shortages, severe difficulties, obviously manpower, the outflow of experts, of specialists, who many of whom have left the country as the war started. Of course, the recruitment for Russia's aggressive war has resulted in over 1 million dead and wounded. So this is additionally draining the resources of Russia. But of course, the Kremlin has found some creative ways to try to, if not compensate completely, to kind of to be able to work around that. As you know, they are recruiting minorities in Russia, in the Far East, in Siberia, and the Caucasus, etc. Or they were recruiting prisoners and people from the lower social strata or classes. And so Putin so far hasn't touched the mostly the cities of the core cities of Russia, which are Moscow and St. Petersburg, because he doesn't want any social upheaval and trouble and protests and demonstrations. But definitely when it comes to resources, when it comes to manpower, Russia has serious problems. And of course, the shadow fleet, which today it was confirmed that Ukraine did successfully hit a Russian shadow fleet tanker in the Mediterranean, which is amazing. So this will put additional serious pressure on Russia. Of course, the sanctions against Lukoil. Again, I don't think that Putin will give up so quickly. Maybe in a couple of years if the situation continues. But unfortunately, the pressure on Russia, yes, it's working, but not as fast and as decisively as everybody was hoping. Everybody in the West is hoping.
What indicators would you monitor to gauge the moral and cohesion of Russia's military and political leadership? I mean, public opinion, elite signaling, budget relocation, or shifts in command structure? And what would constitute a meaningful shift toward de escalation or escalation?
I think, as I said, as long as Putin and his circle are in power, I don't see any real de-escalation. There may be some kind of freezing of the conflict temporarily, the freezing of Russia's maybe actions along the line of contact in the Donbass, for example. But I think they will continue with bombarding the unfortunately Ukraine's civilian infrastructure, Ukraine's cities and the population. And so I don't see any real de-escalation at this point. Of course, there may be some indicators in the future. Again, protests. I mean, historically, as you know, when Russia loses wars, whether it's the Russo-Japanese War or the First World War, Russia has always experienced serious social and political problems, revolutions really, and regime change after that. Putin and his and the Kremlin know that very well, so they will not allow, try to not allow this to happen. But again, if there are some protests of soldiers protests, or maybe soldiers riots, obviously the mercenaries are not used that actively these days because of what happened with Prigozhin, but still, maybe relatives of the soldiers. Today, Putin spoke about problems. He admitted that there were some problems in the payments of and compensation for the killed in action and killed and wounded. So if he admits that, that means that there is actually a serious problem, and so he's trying to use his public um, skills to to deceive, to lie to the Russian public that things are under control. So yes, things of this nature, elite signaling. I mean, obviously, some sort of fake liberalization, maybe appointing someone who is not a hardliner. I mean, these are the usual tricks, the usual in Russia's toolbox, the usual tools that they use. So any of those, if it ever happens, but I think for a year or two, unfortunately, I personally don't see any de-escalation, serious de-escalation, and any liberalization there.
Mhm. Actually, my next question is related to your previous response, and I would like you to expand your thought
Yeah.
with regard to the Kremlin's strategic communications. How do you expect Russia to frame the conflict domestically and internationally to maintain legitimacy, manage dissent, and deter external pressure? And what misperceptions should Western analysts watch for?
Actually, Putin has answered this question today, and I think in the last couple of days there were statements of this nature by Putin and by his regime, by his ministers. The way they frame the need to continue the war, the aggressive war against Ukraine, is that, as Putin said, we need to liberate our um, long, historically, long traditional territories. Uh, so, so this is how he explains the continuing suffering of that this war will bring to the Russian people, to the population of Russia. These are not Ukrainian territories. Actually, these are Russian territories that need to be liberated. Of course, this is complete nonsense. This is part of Russia's information warfare, disinformation, propaganda, also what we call lawfare, legal warfare, just trying to use fake, quasi-legal arguments to justify aggression, and also the conquest and incorporation of territories. For the West, again, Putin said today that we will not launch any new special military operations if the West, which is Western Europe, agrees to treat Russia with respect. So obviously, it's not even we say a thinly veiled threat. It's not even a veiled threat. It was a direct threat. So either you behave as we want you to do. So you do what we tell you to do. This is what respect means for the Kremlin. Or we can repeat this. This aggression against Ukraine, also in other parts of Europe, probably the Baltic states, Finland, of course, Poland, Romania, etc. I mean, you see they're shooting now at bombarding the bridges that connect Odessa with Romania, and with the southwestern part of the country, and so this is a serious escalation. So I think framing it, it's the tools are the same. Fake legitimacy, justifications that are based on nonsensical arguments, but they make sense to the Russian people. And to the West, of course, again, a combination of these fake claims, territorial claims, historical, the perverse historical analogies, but also direct threats, either with the special military operation, or, for example, deploying Oreshnik missiles to Belarus, deploying Yars intercontinental missiles to the launching tubes in the launching sites across Siberia. All these are messages for the West, and including for the US too.
Looking ahead, what would a plausible short to medium term trajectory look like for Russia's strategic posture given current resource trends, potential scenario for escalation, stalemate, or gradual disengagement?
Well, first of all, Russia is not alone in unfortunately, is not alone in this fight, in its aggressive war. As we said, China has put its technological and economic might behind Russia's war efforts, although not really openly, but everybody knows that they do that. Also, Iran supplies quite a lot, and of course, North Korea supplies also troops. So if Russia was fighting alone, then it would have been easier to deplete its resources. But now that it has effectively, three powerful, one really powerful ally, great power, which is China, one regional power, Iran, and of course one rogue totalitarian communist power such as North Korea, and of course some others who help it in various ways. And so, I don't see Putin giving up that easily. On top of that, Russia has an ally in the White House, unfortunately, in the persona of Donald Trump, and many in his administration who seem to think that if you deal with Russia, if you promise them economic deals and contracts and development, maybe they will work with the US and against, and this will somehow put pressure on China. I think this is a dangerous illusion. Russia and China will not, the US will not be able to break the Russian-Chinese bond, let's put it this way, the connection. And so, but nonetheless, the US also is putting a huge pressure, quite shamefully, on Ukraine, as we all know. And so Putin, when he and Putin's and his regime, they calculate the future development, they don't only think of soldiers or money, they also think of the political warfare and of their alliance, or at least of their ability to influence Trump and the current US administration. So I think to make the long the long answer short, in the short term, I expect more of the same, bombarding, unfortunately, the Ukrainian infrastructure, bridges, electrical systems, the electrical grid, etc., power plants. In the medium term, of course, the continuation of the political pressure on Ukraine, also by using the Trump administration. And then, of course, that comes the summer and the summer offensive. So, and then come the elections in the US in November. So I think, if we have to get into Putin's mind, I would say between now and next November, or maybe even the end of next year. So there is 10 to 12 months where he can hope that the US will not get involved very strongly, very decisively on the side of Ukraine, and so he can do whatever he wants, whatever he can with the resources that he has.
Mark, well, thank you very much for your time and for this interview, and have a good day.
Thank you, Maxim. Always a pleasure joining and talking to you.